We finally have preview footage from the events held over the past 2 months, and after watching it all, I do have a few major concerns I hope Ubisoft addresses before launch or at a later time. My biggest concern by far is the newly added cutscenes, particularly in the Lucy Baldwin missions. I'm completely fine with expanding the existing lore and adding new story content. In fact, I welcome it. My concern is purely in the way the majority of these scenes are being presented. The procedural style, animations, and camera work feel noticeably disconnected from the original game's cinematic direction. The difference becomes especially apparent when these new scenes are placed alongside Black Flag's original performance capture cutscenes. Edward's body language in some of these moments feels off to me. The repeated hands on hips, stands, and exaggerated facial expressions lack the grounded charisma that defined his character in the original game. This raises a much larger concern regarding the newly added story content as a whole, especially the newly written scenes by Darby McDevitt. Black Flag's emotional weight came heavily from its cinematic presentation, performance capture, music, and character performances working together. That is an essential part of why those moments still resonate over a decade later. Going from the original game's directed cinematics to these newer procedural conversations is a night and day difference. A scene that particularly stood out to me was the new Adewale diving bell sequence. In the original game, Edward simply needed to acquire enough money to purchase the diving bell. In Resynced, there is now an alternate way to obtain it, which on paper is actually a good addition. The issue is purely in the presentation. The scene itself lacks the cinematic quality present throughout the original game, and because of that, it ends up feeling less impactful than it should and pulls you out of it. And this is where my concern for future Assassin's Creed titles comes in as well. I genuinely hope Codename Hexe does not lean too heavily into this style of cutscene presentation. Even smaller creators today can achieve strong cinematic results using accessible motion capture workflows, which is why it feels strange seeing a remake of one of Ubisoft's most beloved games rely on these kinds of conversation systems again. Performance capture matters. It is part of the soul of these stories. It is what allows us to connect with the characters emotionally, to feel their victories, losses, frustrations, and growth. Black Flag is that game which makes me feel something. I get attached to the characters. When the animation language becomes repetitive or overly procedural, that immersion begins to break apart. Let's just take a look at the recent Assassin's Creed Shadows. Let's take it as an example. Take a look at these two cutscenes and tell me performance capture isn't the answer.
I didn't know. Forgive me.
I already did.
She's not worth it! Go! Go!
And stay out of Yiga!
The game would have been way better and way more serious if it had proper and consistent cinematic direction. Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, Shadows, and now Black Flag Resynced. All of these games are suffering from the same problem. Assassin's Creed stories and characters are no longer taken seriously by many people, and I know that for a fact because I've been following this for years. These procedural cutscenes simply are not good enough. Now, from what I've seen, most of the original cutscenes appear to remain intact, which is absolutely the right decision. And comparing those original scenes to some of the newly added ones makes the difference in presentation even clearer. Black Flag Resynced deserves additions that feel seamless with the original experience. That being said, I'm not expecting this to be changed a month before release, but I'm hopeful that future entries will address this. Now there's also the lighting. I have been learning cinematography and using Unreal Engine 5 for around 10 months now, and dynamic lighting, both in Unreal and the Anvil engine, is an incredible feature. Thing is, I do feel it can sometimes look like a slight step back compared to the original release, especially in scenes like this one with Anne Bonny.
Another?
A rum flip this time.
And where'd I find fresh eggs in this wretched town? There's little else but piss and insects.
Aye, we're working on that.
Dear lady, what do they call you?
And when they're sober, a jilt when they're sauced, but never lady.
Well, good Leanne,
because the original game likely relied more heavily on baked lighting to perfect those moments visually, though that is still a small price to pay when you have an open world this visually impressive, as well as existing performance capture story cutscenes. One of the core pillars of this franchise is stealth gameplay. While we haven't gotten any new social stealth footage, we did get a lot of general stealth gameplay, which definitely has potential, but still isn't quite there yet. The first thing I noticed that got old very quickly just by following this gameplay since the first reveal is the strong hidden blade shing sound upon assassinating. It sounds very nice, I like it, but I'd prefer if it were used more sparingly, for example only during air assassinations. From what I've been able to notice about the detection system, it has a tendency to be inconsistent. I assume the gameplay was recorded on the normal difficulty, but it is very unforgiving at times, which poses the question, how does it behave on the highest difficulty? This wouldn't be much of a problem if the assassination animations weren't so high profile. When Edward assassinates from a hiding spot, he can instantly be detected by surrounding guards, and when he's assassinating from a stalking zone, there is no way to avoid briefly leaving the hidden state during the animation. The way to fix this is by using different animations based on approach, something I already mentioned in previous videos. I want the low and high profile system back. Imagine if we had walking as the default speed instead of jogging. Then walking up to a guard would be less tedious. We take him out with a subtle and quiet assassination which preserves the flow of our gameplay. I believe this can happen. The blueprint exists and the subsequent games would benefit greatly from this. Stealth itself needs it. The amount of times Edward sticks to random objects instead of doing what you want him to do, you have no control over the intensity and speed of his assassination moves. All this would be way more controlled if we had separate triggers for similar actions. The entire movement system has felt weightless since we lost the low and high profile system. And yes, ironically, even Valhalla felt weightless to me because control was non-existent. Social stealth would be elevated as well because walking is a socially acceptable action, meaning guards are not wary of us when we simply walk, which could lead into social stealth tweaks and improvements, and I'm out of breath. Out of all the possible improvements, this is what I want to see the most. And also it goes without saying, parkour would be so much better for it as well, but that is a topic for another time. Now, there was a low-profile assassination that made me smile ear to ear. I saw it in I Am Rob's preview video. It was an AC Unity animation which still seemed a bit unpolished, so I'm not gonna jump to conclusions just yet. Something that the community has also been vocal about is the sudden camera cut when double assassinating, and I completely agree that it should be removed in favor of smoother and more natural transitions, especially since the animations themselves clearly support it. Double assassination just feels slightly off when the camera cuts suddenly, and what doesn't help is the fact that the timing window for triggering it seems very small, which can feel pretty janky. That said, I'm still hopeful many of these polish issues will get addressed. Shadows might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it was very polished at launch, so I trust the Singapore team to give us the best experience possible here. But stealth isn't the only area where the game struggles to balance its original identity with modern RPG mechanics. There are also some noticeable differences between Resynced and the 2013 game, particularly regarding immersion and realism. One of those concerns is the hunting system. Why exactly am I parrying jaguars and crocodiles? Why can't I one-shot a boar with the pistol? In the original 2013 game, hunting was simple. You could air assassinate animals, and if they noticed you, you had quick-time events. Personally, I much prefer that approach. It felt more believable and more in line with the grounded tone AC4 originally had. It feels like the remake borrows a little too heavily from recent Assassin's Creed systems, instead of fully committing to Black Flag's original identity. Even smaller details, like Edward's swords floating without proper sheaths during Sequence 1, they slowly add to that sense of disconnect. Ubisoft has emphasized that this is not an RPG, which I'm glad to hear, but traces of those systems still remain in ways that feel unnecessary. At its core, AC4 Black Flag never needed exaggerated enemy health or overly gamified hunting mechanics. Its strength was always its atmosphere, fantastic cinematic storytelling, grounded animation work, and the very fantasy of being Edward Kenway himself. On their own, all these issues may seem minor, but together they begin to affect immersion and tonal consistency. That being said, I do want to stress this clearly. This is criticism, not hate. I genuinely want to play this game. I love this franchise. Visually, it looks extremely good. The world looks alive, the Caribbean feels fresh, and there is clearly a lot of passion behind many of these changes. That is why I think people are being so vocal about the areas they still feel need work. Not long to go until the game releases. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again very soon. Thank you for watching.